I'm going to go ahead and start by introducing you, Diana Ostberg. You're an exemplary leader and collaborator, right? You consistently provide a high level of service to both your clients and your fellow team members, and you have a wide-ranging portfolio of projects. I hope you're going to talk to us about today, spanning public and private clients. And that's another thing that I want to know, which one is your favorite, public or private?
Okay.
You are recognized by your colleagues as a calm voice of leadership on project teams. So you don't get really, anxious as easy when you're behind your project timelines. And you are valued by your clients for your ability to understand the needs, which is extremely important in this field, and recognized in the architecture industry as someone who can shape the future of architectural design and construction. And I'm extremely excited to know how is that. But then I'm going to start by asking you if you can take a minute or two to introduce yourself and how you got to where you're at today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you as well. I was able to watch a little bit of some of the back episodes. So you've had so many exciting guests. As you said, my name's Diana. I'm an architect in Boston. My firm is called Saam, and we are about 40 people, architects and interior designers. We work on a wide range of projects, just like my bio there said. So I'm trained as an architect, and about 5 years ago, started getting an on-the-job education in the COO role at Sun. So learned a lot about business. We're still a small, medium-sized firm, so I cover HR, IT, and finance as well as operations. So my normal week is about half project work. I still manage projects and I'm highly involved with clients, and about half time with all the things that need to happen to run the firm.
Very interesting. Number of hats that you have on your desk that you keep flipping all day long.
Yes, for
Very
sure.
interesting. Yeah. Uh, how long have you had Sam now?
We've been a firm just 10 years. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary the beginning of this month in June. Oh,
Did
it's
you
July
start the
now.
company
So 11.
or did you start it up or
I am not one of the founders, but I was one of the first ones in the door within the first month or so. And the group of us that are in leadership now and some of our employees all worked together at previous firms. A lot
and
of history.
I can't help but ask, what does SAM stands for? Does it stand for anything or just a name?
Yeah, great question. So it's Saam, which rhymes with calm. That's the way to
Hmm.
remember it, that I always tell people. And it's a word in Afrikaans and Dutch that means together or collaborate.
Oh, does it?
Yes. So
Very
that we were
interesting.
founded to try and foster collaboration across the industry within the office and try and do some of that in a more progressive way.
So which one do you enjoy the most? I know you're an architect, right? Academically,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And then but you're doing various roles right now. So which one do you really enjoy the most?
It's a tough question to answer. I never want to get completely away from the architecture roots. Um, my bio talks about, being a leader in the industry. Earlier in my career, I was very involved in the implementation of Revit and the 3D modeling technologies that are pretty commonplace now. So it's nice that in a leadership role, I still sort of have that technical background. Although I think my staff members get nervous when I get in there and try to start doing things in the model at this point. But I've also it's nice to learn new things. I've really enjoyed learning about running a business. It's not something I ever really aspired to do, honestly, but I've enjoyed it more than I thought. And everything, no matter what business you're in, it's really about people, right? And so I enjoy being in an operations role where it's so much about just hearing what people need in our office, hearing what our clients need for us to all be more successful together. So
And now
not
that you're
really an
running,
answer. I like both.
I know it's really really hard to kind of pick one. But then now that you're running, you have this experience of running a business. Which
Mm,
what's the most challenging piece of running a business like some?
yeah. For us in a client facing industry and where budgets change, clients' expectations change. We're very heavily in public work right now. And
Uh-huh.
so that can be an unpredictable cycle. Some would say less unpredictable than, say, the developer world. But workload and staffing is the biggest challenge, I would say, in running the
Uh-huh.
business, especially at our size, where I think in a much larger organization, there's a little more float, right? If one project slows down, those people can help somebody else. There's a bigger kind of pool of work to draw from. We're still at a point where one big project slowing down makes a big difference. So trying to
So
make sure that doesn't happen.
got it. And then
Yeah.
you also mentioned staffing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it such a problem? It's incredible because almost every guest that I spoke to brought this point up. So what's going
Oh,
on?
really? It's one of those things that from the outside, you don't realize how challenging it is or how difficult it is. Just think, how hard is it to take the work and assign the right people to the work, right? It goes back to what I was saying before about things start and stop, schedules change, right? If no client ever changed their schedule or ever changed their mind about anything, staffing would be easy, right? But things change, things speed up, things slow down. You've got new people, you're not quite sure what their skill sets are, right? So you try them somewhere, maybe that doesn't quite work. And then you've got to shift around within the office. All of those things. You know, architects talk a lot about their backlog, which other industries would call their pipeline, right?
Mhm.
What's coming down the line. And it just seems very hard to predict when things will actually start. Think about some of the government entities, they do have typical funding cycles, right? So you can predict a little bit more around there, but it's not uncommon for, say, we're targeting the end of someone's fiscal year and they don't get the funding that year. All of a sudden, you've got a
Oh my
project that
God.
it's still
Mhm.
happening, but just probably not for another year, right? So how do you
And doesn't that
shift that
impact your
around?
profitability for the project? I mean, when you have a project estimated to take this much time and you have resources allocated to it, dedicated to that project timeline, but then the
Yeah,
timelines start fluctuating up and down and speed wise, doesn't
for
that
sure.
really mess up your planning altogether? And you might end up with a project that is actually losing versus making any profit out of it.
You do, you get into points where you're like, well, I know I need this person in a couple months when the other project starts up. Where can we put them for now? Best case scenario, one thing speeds up and while something else slows down, right? And that's where being in a smaller firm like this, we can be really nimble and move people
Mm.
around.
Yeah, and
Just,
who was the most challenging in sourcing out what function in particular?
for our internal staff,
Mm. Yes, we were intern staffing.
you know, there's a bit of a gap. I think many industries experience this in the people that would have been young architects in 2008 during that
Mm.
difficult time in the economy. A lot of people left the industry. So those
Oh,
people, would be what, like your 15-ish years experience people right now. So people that aren't are like starting to run their own projects but are really strong technically. You can give them something to do and they can just completely take it over on their own, right? Without a lot of
mm.
guidance. That's sort of a staff experience range that historically or lately we've had a little bit of trouble finding people.
And are they expensive?
I mean, I think things are softening a bit now, but it was
Mm.
very expensive to get people the past couple of years for sure.
Do you have any terms with the kind of agreements that you sign with your customers that protects you from projects dragging and dragging and dragging?
And we certainly try to put time boundaries around phases of the projects, even if it's not specific dates. Just say,
Mm.
here's the price for this phase. It's going to take about 12 weeks. Anything beyond that, we want to talk about additional compensation. But I think we're not as good as, say, our counterparts in law when it comes to like tracking our time so specifically, or even making those asks afterwards about like, hey, it's been 14 weeks instead of the 12. What do you want to do? I think a lot of people tend towards keep the client happy. It's only 2 extra weeks, and then sometimes all of a sudden it turns into 6, and then you're kind of in a different spot. But
Is it more common this thing, this behavior on the public or private projects?
I think it's across both, really.
Mhm.
Um, I think the public entities maybe you're sort of locked into their master agreement, right?
Mm.
Their master contract. And so maybe you don't
Mm.
have quite as much negotiating power around that at the start of the
Mm.
project. But but on the flip side, I work with several public clients that are, very fair when when you present the case of
Mm.
this is taking longer than expected, or you've changed your mind about a few things, my level of effort has gone up and having conversations around that.
And who do you like more? As an architect and as a
Mm.
leader running a business, which pretty much segment or sector is your favorite, the private or public?
I have been very heavily public for the recent years. I've done some small work for some private universities, which
Mm,
those little doses of it are fun, even when you think about, something like specifying what carpet do you want to use, right?
yeah.
In the public world, you're either like giving three alternates or trying to make it open bid, right? In the private world, it can be kind of fun to just say, like, that's exactly the one that I want. It's a very specific example, but I enjoy the public work. Our office is woman owned, and so that has been helpful for us getting in with a lot of public agencies.
Are they less demanding? Because you're not the first guest who answers the same pretty much answer. It gives me that, I enjoy working with public more than private. I don't know why. Is it just
I
they're less
don't think they're
demanding
less
or
demanding. No, I
they're
don't think
not?
that's it. I think a lot of our work has some sort of aspect of um, public good to it, which is
Mm,
maybe a part of it. You can feel
yeah.
it's easier to feel connected to the mission of whatever agency you're working
Because
for.
yeah, like the social factor kicks in, like social
Exactly.
responsibility and all that. Yeah.
We do a lot of work for elementary schools and high schools, and so that it's really easy to feel like you're doing something that's helping
Do
that
you feel you're
community.
more creative when you're working for a public or a private sector? It doesn't matter.
There's a range
Where,
of
let me let
architects,
me
right?
let me rephrase that question.
Okay. All right.
What type of projects that you feel like you're unleashing your creativity, really, as an architect?
Hmm. Well, the way I was starting to answer that, I think I'm going to still stick with, which is there's a range of types of architects, right? And kind
Mm,
of one end of the spectrum is like the Frank Gehry's, the people that the public know that are very well known, crazy creative designs. And then the other end of the spectrum is more technical, right? Like, where does the waterproofing go to make sure this wall doesn't leak? That sort of things. So I will start off by saying I definitely fall more on the technical end of that spectrum
mhm.
than the super creative end of the spectrum, which is probably why getting involved in the business side of things
Do you
has
fight a
has
lot
worked out.
with the creative guys?
Well, you go back to spending money and going over the amount of effort that you said you were going to take. Yes, that is
Yeah,
an
yeah,
age old conflict, I'd say.
yeah.
I mean, I'm a believer that there's room for creativity in everything, whether it's
Mm,
the normal way that people think about it in terms of really splashy, eye-catching design, but also, for a client who doesn't have a lot of money. I'm thinking of one elementary school we worked in particular where the community didn't have a ton of money to spend, and just creativity there around like how do you get them what they deserve, something beautiful, something super functional without breaking the bank.
Is it functionality? Is it creativity? Is it what is the order, the precedence order, or kind of the order of importance to designs in the United States in
Yeah.
comparison to other markets around the world, if you're privy to that?
Hmm. I mean, I think the public work definitely tips more towards like function and budget before creativity. And there are exceptions. And as I just said, I think there's room for creativity in everything, but there's more of you're keeping your eye kind of more on that
Mm,
function and being on budget and things. I'm not so sure around the world. I mean, I think Europe is certainly in many ways far ahead of us in terms of sustainability, another
mm,
layer to all of this, right? But they design some really beautiful things,
mm.
and I think we probably have a lot to learn there as well.
How much of a factor this is becoming in the recent years, the sustainability in particular? Are you guys hearing it more and more often than before? Is it becoming an engraved requirement in comparison to a nice to have kind of thing?
Yeah, it's very, very high priority, especially for the public agencies who
Mm,
thankfully are trying to lead the way a bit for the world with that. I'm in Massachusetts where we have a very, very strong energy code.
mm,
So what used to be kind of going above and beyond and trying to earn a lead certification, you now just have to do in Massachusetts to meet that code.
uh-huh.
Um, so
Interesting.
that's a lot of it is just sort of getting baked into business as usual. And then you have agencies that will adopt, even higher standards, or maybe they're focused on the net zero energy piece of it, and some are focused on, let's really reduce our water consumption or have landscaping that doesn't need irrigation. There's different
Mm.
things I think that appeal more to other people, but it's certainly a very big factor. And a lot of places are still looking for those different certifications, whether it's LEED or Passive House or any of those.
And do you think that's going to increase as a trend in the future, or is it just kind of stagnate where it's at right now?
I think that the regulations are going more towards that. Maybe that's a little bit of my Northeast bias coming in, right? Because I'm not sure that's true at the national level, that the regulations are keeping up with that. But um, I
Do you
certainly hope
advocate? Do
so.
you advocate for that?
We do, yeah, definitely. I
Mm,
mean, from our point of view, buildings are a big producer of greenhouse gases. They're also a big user of carbon in the
mm,
construction process, takes a lot of that. So I think we have a responsibility to sort of push that even for the clients who maybe it's not their number one priority. Again, and you're getting part of the way there by just following the code anyway, right?
yeah. What does some, if I'm pronouncing it right, please
You
correct
got
me.
it that time. Nice
What
job.
exactly? What does some specialize in?
Mm. If I had to pick one overarching thing, since we are in several different markets, I would say it's client service, which sounds
Hmm.
a little bit like a pat answer, but we have a very high percentage of repeat business and a big focus amongst the office. And it's just really part of our culture that the best business development that we can do is making our existing clients really, really happy. Because
Mm,
even in the public world where there's, sort of transparent processes for competition, making sure it's fair, when people remember the work that you did for them and people talk
mm.
and both good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, do you really go into a fierce competition for projects that are out there, and what's your strategy around that?
Hmm. We're noticing even in the public sector that competition is really ticking up lately. And I suspect that's because as developers are less able to get financing for projects,
Mm,
that private sector work slows down. Some of
mm,
the architects, typically in that arena, are testing the waters in the public arena to try to make sure they have enough work.
mm,
Um, you know, we do a lot of research around opportunities that make sense for us,
mm,
right? So we're not chasing everything, trying to narrow the focus to the ones where we feel like we have a really good chance. So that's the first kind of step and part of it.
mm,
And then we do our research, really trying to understand beyond what's in, the RFP that we received. What is this owner trying to do? What are their priorities and what's their mission? How do we have alignment there? And what are
mm,
the ways that we can bring together a team that really resonates for
mm,
them? We will often try and bring together, being a woman-owned business, we'll try to compile teams that have sub-consultants that also are either women or minority-owned, disadvantaged businesses. That can be a compelling story for people too around the greater team that we're bringing together.
how's the market today, Diana? Is it because I think when we had the infrastructure bill, everyone
Mm,
was really excited about it. I'm still excited about it, and obviously it was it was said that it will take a couple of years for all these projects to kind of break down and kind of go into all these different organizations around and companies around the country. Uh,
mhm.
do you think we're there? Do you think we're living that growth period as a result of that infrastructure bill, or no? It's still not broken down into projects. It's still not put into motion like it should.
Yeah, we're seeing some of it. I mean, the projects that are truly, new highways and things would
Hmm.
be outside of our area of expertise. But we do a lot of work with Massachusetts Port Authority. So they run the airports and the port
Hmm.
here in Massachusetts, and they've seen some of that funding come through. So that touches a bit there. Um, I think there's more to come. The public sector seems kind of busy as ever to us right now. I do see some slowing down with the developer type work, and that people are kind of being just a little more cautious. Um, and there's trickle down to that difficulty in lending does start to trickle down to everybody eventually.
Did you guys benefit from that infrastructure bill by any shape, way, or form?
I mean, some of the work that I was talking about at Massport is those projects happened faster and at a bigger scale due to getting that funding. Um, I think that's the biggest place that we've seen it so far. But again, since we wouldn't be designing the more traditional infrastructure, highway, transit type projects.
One of the major concerns that we've had when that infrastructure bill came out was that we end up with all these major projects going to the big top 30, top 40 companies in the country and they stay there, right? And
Hmm.
that
Right.
doesn't really incentivize the economy, the industry of AEC as much as we would want it to.
Yeah.
Do you think that's happening? Do you think anything changed there, or it is the case?
I mean, I think those companies are always going to be well positioned for that type of work. It's a place where having those requirements written in for participation by small business or women or minority owned businesses can be a
Mm.
way to get that sector or that part of the industry involved as well. And we
Do,
do typically, at least for Massachusetts, when it's come to Massachusetts agencies, that is usually written in there.
do you get sub? Do you usually get any? Do you do any work for these big companies? Do you get subcontracted for any of the major projects they do?
We have in the past.
Mm.
We've been involved in some transit work in the past as a sub to larger companies. We are not doing as much of it now,
Mm.
partially just because we decided not to pursue that more transit industry as as a primary sector of ours.
Mm.
But also as we've grown, there are benefits to being able to be that prime contract holder and do
Mm.
it, lead the team ourselves rather than working for a bigger company.
What's your take? What's your take on the industry these days, Diana? What bothers you in this industry?
Hmm. Well, I I think one thing that differentiates Saam is a bit of a pivot, but everybody's talking about hybrid work or remote work or forcing people back to the office and all of that. I think when it
Mm.
comes to getting and retaining labor, that's becoming a bigger and bigger issue. There's definitely an opinion amongst some about, you have to be together in the same physical space to do our work, to do design, to collaborate, to give people mentoring. Um, we've taken a different approach. I know you've had Architects Fora on your show recently for a few series. And we're kind of, in the same vein as them as well, that it's time for a little bit of change in the industry around that. And so we are not completely remote like Architects Fora is. We do have a physical office space in Boston, but we have employees that are in different states, completely remote. And even our local people can be flexible and just
Which
come
model do
in
you think is
when it
more
works for them.
efficient? Which model is more productive or efficient? Being hybrid, completely remote, or just go back to office?
I mean, hybrid is working for us. I don't think
Mm.
it's for everybody. You have to be able to be really intentional around the things that might happen a bit more naturally when you were together. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, if you were just in the office having a conversation around design, other people might overhear it on the team.
Mm.
You need to make sure that you're including the right people when you're going to be having those conversations if some are at home or some are in the office. Um, the mentoring thing is another piece that I hear a lot from people, detractors. They're like, well, how, if you're not in the office and you're not overhearing things or you're not going to stand by somebody's desk, um, we've just found there's ways that you can sort of schedule that in and make sure that's still happening. It does take a certain type of employee though, too. Somebody who's
Mm.
going to take initiative and not just sort of be out of sight, out of mind, right? People have to be, it's a two-way street. People have to be willing to reach out and initiate that as much as the leadership does, but it goes both ways for sure.
And do you guys plan to continue to be hybrid?
We do. Yeah. We were hybrid even before the pandemic, actually. When
Oh,
Saam
were
was
you?
founded in 2014, people had flexible schedules. They could work when and where they wanted. Of course, we're serving clients, right? So you've got to be available when the clients need you or when your team needs you for meetings. We had a little bit of a head start on people before the
What does
pandemic.
your team members like most? Hybrid, or they want to come back to office? What do they like?
I think people really value the choice. The
Mm.
people that are out of state, they don't really have the choice to come to the office. They're fully remote. But our people that are local really enjoy being able to make that decision in the morning. And based on,
Mm.
how silly is it to come into the office and then sit on Zoom calls with people outside of the office all day, right? Like you could have done that in the quiet of your home where you weren't
Yeah.
competing acoustically with everybody else. But teams will make plans to come in on the same day and say, like, hey, we all have this afternoon free. Let's gather around the conference table, look at things together, just
How about
being
your
kind of smarter
customers?
about it. By and large, our customers have kept virtual meetings. And so as long as we're available when they need them, and we do have some that we go to, I
Mm.
go to the Mass client a lot myself. I don't think it has come up or is something that really affects them that much, honestly. As long as you're doing good work and getting things done, it's sort of they're happy.
Obviously, staffing is a pain point for you. You brought it up at least 3, 4 times on this call, and I feel you. I
My
feel you.
coworkers are gonna laugh when they hear it because yes,
No, I
it's
understand.
challenging.
It's pretty challenging, especially when you're doing if you're doing cost estimation, or if you're an estimator, or you're trying to estimate how much time you're going to need for that project, and then the projects accelerate at one point, decelerate at some other point, and you
Sure.
really have a big payroll to maintain, and then you can't just
Hmm.
have resources sitting there doing nothing just because somebody on the client side decided that they want to gonna go slow on whatever phase of the project. It really kills. It has a lot of uh, downside to it. It kills the motivation, kills the drive. It kind of puts
Yeah.
everybody down. The most damage it causes is the bottom line of the project, is profitability of
Hmm.
the project. But then this also brings another question up, which is, are we profitable enough as an industry? Are we? Why does it feel and seem within the industry some areas make much more money than others? For instance, contractors, builders in particular, or even whoever the developers are, make the most money in comparison to everyone else in this ecosystem or chain.
Yeah.
And then even when we zoom out a little bit and compare this industry to other industries, are we even priced where we need to, priced right in terms of the amount of effort and thought leadership and energy that we bring, change that we do to this world? Are we paid fairly enough in comparison to lawyers, to doctors, to IT guys?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've looked at your lawyer's hourly rates later lately,
No.
but if you compare, we're definitely not as well paid there. And yeah, I mean, you've struck a vein a little bit. I agree. I don't think that we're valued or paid enough, and the mechanisms we have in place are just kind of silly and things that someone like a lawyer would never consider. When you think about all of the times that architects are competing for work, and as a part of that competing, they're actually doing design work to show the client just to try to win it. So it's free design that we're giving out maybe at the beginning of the project to try to win work. And you don't really have a choice, right? If your competitors are doing it, you've got to try to do it as well. I think the lump sum fee structure is challenging, right? What lawyer at the beginning of a project would try to guess how much effort it's going to take them to get to the end, right? When there's so many unknowns. Well, architects do that all the time, right? We try to guess, and then we're sometimes not brave enough to ask for more compensation when we've gone above and beyond. I think the flip side of it is design is kind of squishy, right? Like it's hard to go and say to the client, maybe now a lawyer can say, like, look, I spent 16 hours and I told you I was only going to spend 12, but here's, I had to review this extra thing. Like when it's just, well, we were working on design, right? It's a little more subjective on how much of that maybe that you need to do. I'll have to say, I think we do have some work to do as an industry to really
I think it
value what we do and
it,
get
it
others
just
to as
doesn't
well.
add up. It doesn't add up. I'll tell you why. Because there's a shortage of resources, human resources, leadership,
Hmm.
skill set out there. Probably the most steep in any industry is the engineering, architecture, construction industry. It's really, really steep from what I observed from all the calls and sessions I did with all these leaders. But at the same time, this just defies the supply demand kind of rule, right? I mean, you have very little
Right.
supply of skill set and leadership and resources, right? And there's a high demand for them, but then again, they compete on the price point, and it's like this circular firing squad. They just kill each other, and they end
Yeah.
up really struggling. I'm yet to talk to a leader in this industry that can wholeheartedly tell me that you think our people are making enough money. Nobody does that. Nobody, I don't think our architects are paid fairly. I don't think our engineers are paid fairly. I'm an
Hmm.
engineer, and if I look at the pay grade of engineers, it's disappointing, to say the least. Very
Yeah.
disappointing. After all the effort that you need to put, all the study, all the work
Hmm. Right.
that you need to put for 4, 5, 6 years to get your degree, and then the internships you have to go to and all that stuff, and then start your engine with the salary pay grades that we have. It's
Yeah.
pathetic, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's going to take the industry working on it together, I think, to get somewhere, right? Challenging to do that as a single firm or just a single place, but
Yeah, I
let's
think we need to
aspire
do
to.
more. We need to start lobbying. Me and you need to start this lobbying
Let's do it. Sign me up.
organization. Diana, I want to conclude this session by going back to you. What are your aspirations, your pretty much hopes and dreams for the future? Is it gonna be through Saam or somewhere else? It's probably a very private question. I'm sorry. You can choose not to answer if you think so. But where do you see
No,
yourself? Where are you at?
you know, I don't think there's any other place that I could be where I would be in this position at this point in
Mm,
my career, where I'm, in a leadership position, decision maker, getting to experience the business side as well as the architecture. I'm very happy where I am. And I think we're doing something special in terms of keeping people in the workforce by giving them flexibility that might not be in the workforce otherwise. So we're just going through a big period of growth now, and I'm excited to kind of see where that takes us. We've got a lot of work, and I think it's going to be a busy few years, but I'm along for the ride.
Well, I'm excited for you as well. I wish you nothing but best of luck. I wish that growth to be sustainable and continue to happen. And I
Yes.
really, really look forward to talk more to you in the future when you've grown even more.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.